Have you scrolled through TikTok or Instagram and saw a video of explosions, mayhem, war scenes, and in the background a voice screaming Allahu Akbar and the comments being full of individuals saying this is the end of the world, or Mahdi is here, or this is the last war? It's going viral. People are frightened. There are some that hope, others that are just lost. But the threat here is not the anarchy on the streets. It's the anarchy in our heads. The manner in which misinformation travels faster than fact, particularly during moments of desperation and fear. We should speak, not speculate, not sensationalize, but to dispel the haze, to get back to what Allah and His Messenger did say. Because the world can be noisy, but the truth is tranquil, distinct, and grounded. Let me bring you to a world that so many of us are living in today without even knowing it. A world not formed by books or intellectuals, but by scrolling thumbs and algorithms. Each day, millions of Muslims wake their phones and immediately are fed videos of bombs exploding, sounds of war sirens, and Allahu Akbars over images of devastation. The sound is haunting, and it's often accompanied by text flashing on screen. The end is near. The Mahdi has come. This is the final battle. There's a drum beat of urgency, a sense of doom, but also mystery and awe. People watch and feel something deep in their chest. Fear, excitement, confusion. And in that moment, between the explosion and the echo, something else happens. Assumptions are made. Ideas are formed. Beliefs take root. But where did those beliefs come from? A 30-second video, a comment thread filled with speculation, a stitched video quoting a hadith out of context. That's the problem. That's where we are. We live in a time where viral clips are replacing trusted scholars, where the first reaction isn't to open the Quran, but to refresh our feed, where a trending hashtag can make people believe they've witnessed the signs of the hour. And that's dangerous. Not just because it spreads misinformation, but because it shapes how we feel about Allah, about our deen, about our place in the world. There's a growing trend I've noticed, especially among younger Muslims, where end time, sensationalism has become almost a form of entertainment. Clips are edited with cinematic music, slow motion, dramatic quotes. You'll hear someone yelling, Allahu Akbar, during a bombing, and the comment section says, this is the sound before the Mahdi appears. Another video plays a heartbeat over footage of Palestine, while a robotic voice says the prophet predicted this moment, and suddenly, without knowing it, someone who's never studied a single verse on the Mai now thinks they've discovered a secret. It's all happening now. They say this is the end. But it's not just misinformed Muslims who are pushing this. It's algorithms. It's designed to keep you hooked. The more dramatic it is, the more likely it is to go viral. The more terrifying, the more addictive. And so, we're left with a population that feels more than they understand. They feel the fear of the end, but they don't understand the signs. They feel the hope for Mai, but they don't understand his context. They feel that Allah is near, but they don't know what He actually said. And so let's ask, what are the consequences of this? The first is confusion. People start connecting dots that were never meant to be connected. They see the collapse of buildings in Gaza and say, this is the moment of Dal. They see Israel's aggression and say, this proves the Mahdi is here. But is there any evidence, any authentic evidence in the Quran or the Sunnah that says the Mahdi's appearance will be triggered by this specific conflict in this specific way? No. Not a single authentic hadith ties the current political state of Palestine and Israel to the arrival of the Mahdi. None. Even the weak hadiths don't explicitly make that claim. But because someone stitched a clip of war with a line from a hadith, maybe from a source they can't even name, people believe it. And when that belief spreads, it creates two reactions: panic or apathy. Panic in the sense that people become obsessed with watching signs and waiting for miracles instead of doing anything practical. Or apathy because they believe everything is already written and there's nothing left to do. But Islam doesn't teach us to sit and wait. Islam teaches us to act, to prepare, to understand, to have yaqin, not just emotion. And that's what's missing in this age of viral religion: the knowledge, the context, the balance. And let's not forget the second danger: despair. When people believe falsely that this is the end, when they think that the suffering in Gaza or Syria or Sudan means that we've reached the final chapter of history, they begin to lose hope. They ask, where is Allah? They say, why isn't the Mai saving us? They assume the worst. And their iman starts to tremble, because they were promised something that was never promised. The reality is this: the end times will arrive. Yes, the Mai will arrive. Yes, Isa alayhi will return. Yes, Jal will manifest. But these things are not caused by viral trends. They are ordained by Allah at His will, and they will happen with accuracy, not chaos. The signs are explicit in the books of Hadith. The ulama have taken generations building them, grading them, critiquing them, and the message is this: don't be hasty. Don't construct your belief upon the back of a TikTok phenomenon. You see, the Prophet never taught this kind of thing. When the people asked him, when is the hour? He didn't provide a date. He said, what have you prepared for it? That's the question we need to be asking. Not is this it, but are we prepared if it is? The preoccupation with signs distracts us from the work of the soul. And maybe that's just what Shaytan desires. Keep them busy speculating so they lose their sincerity. Keep them looking outward so they don't look inward. I recall once reading a comment below a video of a demonstration. This is how the Mahdi's army is beginning. And I thought to myself, do you have any idea what you're saying? Do you have any idea how serious and detailed the description of Mahdi's army is in Hadith? Do you know the difference between symbolic hope and authenticated truth? It's not a joke. It's not a fantasy novel. These are issues of our Aqah. And the moment we make it a social media spectacle, we disrespect the seriousness of prophecy. It's okay to be moved. It's okay to cry when we see the agony. It's okay to yearn for the return of justice, the downfall of oppressors. But we must apply that emotion through the lens of knowledge, not hype. We must remind ourselves to go back to the Quran, back to the scholars, back to authentic sources. Because only there will we have the strength to walk through the fire and not get burned by confusion. And so as we start to talk about this issue before we even bring up the Mi or Dal or Isam, we must clear the table. We must eliminate the noise, the false associations, the TikTok theology, and get back to the basics. What does Allah actually say? What did His messenger actually teach? Because only from that foundation can we start to establish an understanding that is sound, stable, and worthy of the seriousness of the truth. Let's not allow fear to guide us. Let's not allow algorithms to guide us. Let's not allow clout-seeking content creators to dictate our beliefs. Let us turn back to the Quran and Sunnah, not for predictions, but for preparation. Because the true question isn't, has the me come? The true question is, are we the type of people He would want to lead if He did? Imagine the sense of waking up one morning, hearing people on the street, online, even in the masjid, whispering and declaring that the end has come. The Mahdi is here, they declare. Jal is ready to appear. Isa is coming from the heavens, and it's all happening now, right before our very eyes. How do you know? They don't cite a scholar. They don't cite a hadith. They reference a post, a brief video, or a chain message full of half-translations and grand statements. This is the world we live in, a world filled with speculation where truth tends to be drowned out by the cacophony of viral imagination. And yet, what does the Quran really say? What does the hadith really say? If we remove speculation and remind our hearts once again of revelation, what do we discover? Allah in His eternal book did not leave us unguided. He kept reminding us repeatedly that the end result, however dark things appear, is for those who fear Him. He declared, and the end is for the mutakun, the people of taqwa. This declaration by itself bears the burden of history. It reminds us that whatever is occurring at the present time, whether in Palestine or Syria or elsewhere, is within a greater process, a process which is not yet complete. The history of humanity has not come to its final chapter. What you witness today is not the end. It's the middle, the unfolding, the test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared his prophet with knowledge of future trials, not to create panic, but to provide clarity. He informed him of signs to come, some in vivid detail. These signs were kept in hadith literature. Many were found in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and other books like Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Majah, and Ahmad. These are not folklores or fairy tales. They are accurate, authenticated accounts from the best of humanity who never spoke from want. Each word he said regarding the end times is a beacon to believers, if only we take it with the seriousness that it warrants. The Mai, whose name translates to the guided one, is not mythical. He exists. He is part of our heritage. But what is important to realize is that the facts of his appearance, his mission, and his period are not to be fabricated out of whole cloth or cobbled together from contemporary occurrences. They instead are derived from deliberately safeguarded declarations, hadiths garnered, examined, and debated by successive generations of scholars who lived and died upholding the truth. Let's start with what isn't in the hadith. Unlike popular belief today, there is no original hadith that connects the appearance of the Mai to the present condition of Israel or Palestine wars. You will not find it in Bukhari. You will not find it in Muslim. And even in the weak hadiths, that is not mentioned at all. Yes, there are accounts of battles, of international strife, of the downfall of oppression. But to declare this very moment is the cause of the Mahdi, that is not in the text, that is not from the prophet, that is from human emotion, wishful thinking, and efforts to cram modern history into ancient prophecy. But what we do have in sound hadith, however, is something far more specific and even stronger. For instance, in a Sahih narration, the prophet declared that Isa ibn Maryam will come down at the white minaret in Damascus. He will come when the Muslims are getting ready for prayer, and the Mai will already be present guiding the believers. When Isa appears, the Mai will give way, asking him to take charge. But Isa will declare, "No, you are the leader of this ummah," and he will pray behind him. That itself is so beautiful. Isam, a prophet of Bani Israel, showing respect for the ummah of Muhammad by praying behind one of them. It's not merely a sign of the end. It's a sign of how Allah's religion will be one at all times, even at the last hour. Now, what does this say? It says that when Isa arrives, me is already there. It says where the event happens, Damascus. It says when the event takes place, Salah. It says what the etiquette is, respect and unity. This is how the authentic signs of the end are explained. Not with mayhem, not with cries, but with precision. And the thinkers of this ummah have toiled for centuries, keeping us in that state of clarity. Thinkers such as Ibn Hajjah, Nawawi, al-Suyuti, and Ibn Kathir did not just compile hadith. They scrutinized the chains of narration, graded their strength, and brought in context from elsewhere in the deen to interpret them. It may be argued why then are Bukhari and Muslim without a complete hadith on the Mai, and the reason is easy to see. Not all of the true stories are in Muslim or Bukhari. Those books gathered the most stringently authentic stories available to their authors. But numerous Sahih narrations, meaning fully authentic, remain in other books. The hadith regarding the Mai are scattered throughout Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Ahmad, and so on, and taken together they constitute what scholars refer to as mutawat, meaning a collective weight of several narrations from various chains that solidify the truth beyond doubt. Of those narrations, we are informed that the Mai will be of the race of the Prophet and particularly of the family of Fatima. His name will be Muhammad, while his father's name will be Abdullah. He will come during times of great upheaval when the ummah is rife with oppression and injustice. There will be people struggling with each other for leadership, And it will be then that the Mai will come not as one seeking power, but as one running away from it. He will be in Mecca where the righteous believers will compel him to assume leadership. Let that sink in. The Mai does not campaign. He does not self-promote. He is not some boisterous Twitter user or charismatic character attempting to go viral. He is a reluctant leader who has been elected by the people and endorsed by Allah. That's what distinguishes truth from falsehood. And as for the timing, how many pray, "Is he here already? Are these the last years?" The response is only Allah knows. Even the Prophet did not indicate when the me would arrive. He provided signs. Yes, he provided descriptions, but never a timeline. So when you hear that someone tells you definitely, the me will appear this year, or he's already hidden among us, beware. We are not permitted to declare what the Prophet left for us to explore. Rather, the Prophet emphasized preparation. He provided us with the signs so that when they occur, we can see them and realize them, not so that we panic beforehand. He instructed us to build our taqwa, to stay in touch with the Jama'ah, to serve justice, and to pursue knowledge. And if we are in the days of the Mahdi, we will know because the signs will be clear. But if we are not living in those times, then we must live as if we are always ready, always loyal, always based on truth. That is the elegance of our deen. It prepares us for any age without misleading us with conjecture. It invites us to act, not speculate. And most importantly, it invites us to put our trust in Allah, not in omens, not in prophecy, but in the one who owns time itself. So the next time someone comes to you saying, "Look at what's happening in Palestine. This must mean the Mai is coming," ask them gently, what did the Prophet say? What does the Quran say? And are we truly prepared for his arrival or just fascinated by the idea of it? Because in the end, the truth is not hidden in hashtags. It's preserved in hadith, and only those who seek it with sincerity will be guided to its light. There's a strange comfort in believing that someone is coming to fix everything. That in the middle of the chaos and collapse we see around us, a figure will rise who will bring order, restore justice, and lead the believers to victory. The Mai, the name itself, carries a weight, a hope, a longing, even a fantasy for some. And yet very few have truly sat down to understand who the Mai is, what his purpose will be, and most importantly, what our role is in his story. Let us begin at the root. The word Mai means the one who is rightly guided. He is not a prophet, not a messenger, but a righteous man chosen by Allah to lead the Muslim Ummah during a time of great hardship. His arrival is not a mere backdrop to chaos, but a divine response to it. The world he will inherit is not one of stability, but one fractured by tyranny, deception, and disunity. And that's important, because it means he does not create the crisis. He is sent during it. And even more so, he does not begin as a leader, nor does he seek it. His journey is not one of ambition, but one of reluctant responsibility. The Prophet told us clearly that before the Mahdi emerges, there will be a time of immense confusion and global corruption. People will fight over leadership. Wars will rage. Justice will seem like a memory of the past. And during this time, 3 sons of kings will wage a battle over a hidden treasure near the Kaaba in Mecca. Each one will lay claim to it, believing they are its rightful heir. But none of them will succeed. This conflict will become so intense that it will shake the hearts of the believers, and in the midst of this fitna, the Mahdi will appear. Not from among the contenders, not as a warrior claiming leadership, but as a man fleeing from power. Yes, fleeing. The Hadith describe him as a man who runs away from the responsibility. He hides in Mecca seeking refuge, and yet the righteous scholars and believers of the time will find him. They will recognize him not by fame, not by speeches, but by his character, his lineage, and his signs. They will approach him not with threats, but with tears and pleas, and they will force him to accept leadership. They will take his hand and give him bay'ah between the black stone and the maqam of Ibrahim. This moment is not a political maneuver. It is a deeply spiritual and historical event. Imagine it. A small group of believers in the most sacred spot, on earth, giving allegiance to a man who didn't want to lead, but whom Allah chose to lead. This is the beginning of the Mahdi's journey. Quiet, pure, free from ambition. But his journey does not remain small for long. News spreads, and not everyone rejoices. Armies begin to march toward him. Forces, regimes, powers that fear what he represents, a revival of truth, mobilize against him. One such army, as the Hadith says, will be swallowed by the earth in the desert between Makkah and Medina. A divine sign, a warning to the world that what is happening is not man-made. It is from Allah. And so the Mahdi becomes more than just a leader. He becomes a symbol of divine support. He begins to gather believers, not just the righteous, but those seeking redemption. He leads with justice. He restores balance, and he does not do it alone. This is where the deeper wisdom begins to unfold, because many people think of the Mahdi as a one-man army, a miracle worker. But the Hadith never describe him like that. He is a Khalifa, a leader, and that means he requires followers, soldiers, scholars, strategists. He requires an ummah behind him. And that makes us ask, are we the sort of individuals who would be willing to stand alongside him? Because the Mahdi's purpose is not merely to fight, it is to unite, to cleanse, to reform. He will fight battles. Yes, but more than that, he will lead hearts. He will restore the Sunnah in the countries where it had been lost. He will restore honesty and trade, dignity and rule, and harmony in worship. He will restore the spirit of Islam and not the husk. According to one hadith, in his time, wealth will circulate freely. So freely that he will not even be counting it. He will give it out without restriction. Men will approach seeking charity, and he will provide them with it without hesitation. Why? Because the world had endured so much hoarding, corruption, and poverty that the Mahdi's justice will be a flood after a famine. It's not economics. It's restoring barakah. But even in his time, the trials will not cease, because the world is not a place of rest. It is a testing ground. And one of the most significant tests still remains for the arrival of Dajjal. While Dajjal has not arrived, the Mahdi will have fought many significant battles. He will battle Rome, contemporary Europe, say many experts, and he will triumph. He will be in treaty with them, and for a brief period there will be tranquility, but then there will be treachery. The treaty will be violated, and a huge army will come against him. The Mahdi will assemble the believers, and they will encounter one of the most important battles in Islamic history, the Malama al-Kubra, the War of the Greatness. The war will be unprecedented. The Hadith state it as a war so fierce that one of 3 soldiers will be killed, 1/3 will escape, and only 1 of 3 will emerge triumphant. These are not mere statistics. They are an admonishment. The road of the Mahdi is not an easy one. It demands sacrifice, loyalty, tawakkul. Blood will flow, tears will be shed, but through this, the Ummah shall rise again. And then when the believers are getting ready for prayer with the Mahdi leading them in Jerusalem, another miracle will take place. The sky shall rend, and Isa ibn Maryam shall come down, not as a new prophet, not with a new book, but as a Muslim, of the Prophet Muhammad. He shall come into the masjid as the Iqama is called, and the Mahdi will know him in an instant. He will take a step back and give him the position of Imam. But Isa will tell him, "No, you are in charge of this ummah," and he will pray behind him. Consider what this signifies. A prophet of Allah, blessed and honored, praying behind the Mahdi. It's not a display of humility. It's an expression of unity that this ummah is honored, that even at the end of history, the Muslims are still led by one of their own. And then Isa will step forward to lead in the crusade against Dajjal. But the Mahdi will still be there. He will assist. He will stand by his side, and together they will cleanse the world of the greatest deception men have ever known. Now let us take a moment to reflect. All that the journey of Marty teaches us is one thing. He is not a superhero. He is not a myth. He is a man selected by Allah, tested like us all, sent in the darkest of times to be a beacon. But a beacon that requires fuel. And we are that fuel. Our righteousness, our oneness, our power, our endurance. Then if we really yearn for his coming, we must first set ourselves to be the sort of ummah that he can guide. Not an ummah hooked on argument and schisms. Not a generation that dwells in fantasy and does not remember the fad, but a generation planted in Tawhid, grown up in Quran, molded by the Sunnah, and willing to give everything up for truth. Because the Mahdi is arriving, that is a fact. But whether or not we are prepared for him, that remains a decision only we may make. It is said that the darkness is greatest immediately before the dawn, that in the darkest depths of fear, a light will begin to rise. Not always swiftly, not always, as intensely, but sufficient to illuminate the way ahead. And if there is one chapter in our history that speaks of disorder before order, confusion before victory, it is the one which has to do with the ultimate collapse of false authorities and the coming of a truth that cannot be defeated. The Mahdi is not singular in this narrative. His ascension is merely an introduction to the ultimate showdown, a confrontation so grand, so ruinous, so replete with heavenly meaning that the heavens themselves will wait in their breath. Because even though the Mahdi is a shepherded leader, his time brings with it the grand war of hearts and states, the fall of Isa al-Islam, and the ultimate war against the greatest deceiver this world has ever known, the Dajjal. But first, let us discuss the falling of Isa or the murder of Dajjal. But we should talk about something else that is easily misunderstood or glorified: the fall of Israel. Nowadays, there are many mouths that are quick to associate contemporary events to the emergence of the Mahdi. They gaze at each headline, each military advance, each photograph of resistance and declare, "This is it, this is the fall." And though oppression, killing, humiliation in Palestine are all true, too true that they incinerate the screens and pierce our chests, we must take great care not to blur the pain of the moment with visions of the end. For if we do, we stand to lose sight of the real wisdom in the divine design. From what we discover in the Hadith and the scholars' words, the Mahdi's ascension follows after great changes have already occurred. There is no direct Hadith that mentions that his coming coincides with the early struggles we are seeing today. What we find instead are staged steps, waves of oppression followed by awakening, followed by a downfall of oppressive powers, and then at the midst of bewilderment and longing, Allah sends his servant. So yes, Israel will fall. It is written, "Injustice does not last forever. Falsehood may rise high, but its roots are weak." The Prophet once said, "Indeed, Allah gives respite to the oppressor, but when he seizes him, he does not let him go." Now pause and think what causes the fall of nations. It is not just missiles and politics. It is the rot within. And the Zionist project, as we witness, is one built on theft, lies, and brutality. It is a system that thrives on deception, not only of Muslims, but even of Jews themselves, many of whom reject Zionism, many of whom live peacefully and disagree with what has been done in their name. There are Iranian Jews, for instance, living quietly in Isfahan who hold no loyalty to the Zionist state. They are not oppressors, they are not enemies. And this distinction is important, especially as we approach a time when false binaries dominate the conversation. The Quran does not paint with a broad brush. Allah speaks of Ahlul Kab, of believers among the people of the book, of those who uphold justice, even when others of their kind do not. Truth is never tribal. It is moral. The fall of Israel, as described in some narrations and hinted at by certain scholars, is not simply a military defeat. It is a collapse of ideology, a breakdown of the machinery that props it up. That collapse will come, but not merely through weapons. It will come through exposure, through the peeling back of the veil, through a global shift in awareness. And this is where we return to the present. The role of truth-telling. the PR campaign, the awakening of people across the world, Muslims and non-Muslims who are saying no more. This too is part of Allah's plan. But when the fall comes, it will not signal the end of the story. It will mark the beginning of a greater one, because just as the tide of falsehood recedes, something darker begins to emerge from the shadows. The Dajjal described in the Hadith as Al-Masih Ajjal, the false Messiah. He is a deceiver beyond what our minds can fully grasp. One-eyed, charismatic, able to perform so-called miracles, commanding an army the world has never seen. He will rise from the east. The Hadith in Abu Dawud tells us that he will come from a place in the east called Khorasan, and with him will be 70,000 Jews from Isfahan. Again, the scholars have clarified, this does not mean all Jews, nor does it mean that this is a racial statement. It means that Dajjal will gather around him those who share his mission, people who want to control, deceive, and dominate. And yes, some of them will be from the lineage of those ancient Jewish tribes, but many others will not be. Dajjal is not bound by borders. His deception is universal. When he comes, his power will be unmatched. He will claim to be divine. He will manipulate the skies, bring rain to parched lands, revive seemingly dead crops. People will fall for him, not because they are stupid, but because they are desperate. Because he will offer ease in exchange for loyalty. He will heal the sick, raise the dead, or appear to, and feed the poor. In a world devastated by war and famine, he will look like a savior. And this is what makes him so dangerous. But the Mahdi will not retreat. He will not fall into Dajjal's trap. He will stand firm, and by his side, believers will hold the line. It is during this time, at the peak of deception and fear, that Isa ibn Maryam will descend. The Prophet told us clearly, "He will descend to the white minaret in the east of Damascus, his arms laid on the wings of two angels, his head with drops of moisture on it, as if having just come out of ghusl. He shall be dressed in two saffron-colored garments, and when the believers see him, they will know instantly who he is. The Mahdi will invite him to lead the prayer, but Isa will decline, affirming that this ummah has its leaders and that he is not coming with a new law, but to support the message of Muhammad. This is not just humility. It is a profound affirmation that Islam remains whole, untouched, complete. Even Isam, a mighty prophet, submits to the Sharia of the final messenger. After the prayer, Isa will take charge of the battle against Dajjal. The Mahdi and the believers will stand with him, but Isa will be the one to kill the Dajjal in a place called Lud in present-day Palestine. Isa will strike him down with a spear. The Dajjal, despite all his power, will melt when he sees him, and his blood will stain the weapon of Isa, a divine sign that his end has come. That truth has triumphed. In that moment, everything shifts. Those who follow Dajjal will be exposed. Many who are on the fence will repent. A wave of Christians realizing the truth of Isa's message will accept Islam. And according to some scholars, a number of Jews too will return to the straight path. The deception will shatter, and with it, the illusions that sustained it. What happens next is a period of peace and purity. Isa will rule with justice. The Mahdi will have fulfilled his role, and the world will witness a brief moment of what it was always meant to be, a place of light where truth is not hidden, where hearts are healed, where the name of Allah is honored openly. The wealth of the world will be abundant. The hatred among people will dissolve. Even wild beasts will walk beside humans in peace. But this too is temporary. The world is not Jannah. And after Isa passes and the Mahdi is gone, the cycle of test will return. But for a moment, for a span of years, the earth will breathe. And those who stood firm during the darkness will taste the sweetness of divine fulfillment. All of this begins with the rise of the Mahdi, the fall of falsehood, and the confrontation with Dajjal. But none of it happens without faith, without knowledge, without believers who know what they're facing, who don't fall for false signs, who recognize that being part of the Mahdi's army is not about shouting slogans, but about living Islam, knowing the truth, and standing firm even when the world is burning. Because when the time comes, those who are grounded will rise, and those who were asleep, lulled by rumors and false hopes, will be left behind. Not everyone will fight with a sword. Not everyone will ride into battle or stand in the front lines of war. But everyone, every man, every woman, every child has a role in the unfolding of truth. And that role begins in the heart, in the quiet space between despair and belief, between giving up and holding on. When we talk about preparation for the end times, for the arrival of the Me, for the fall of Dajjal, and the descent of Isa al-Islam, we must first talk about the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of the believer, the heart that remains steadfast. There is a tendency, especially today, to think that our efforts only matter if they are visible, that unless we are leading marches, giving speeches, or going viral on social media, our contributions are insignificant. But the Prophet taught us the opposite. He said, "Whoever among you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. If not, then with his tongue. And if not, then with his heart." And that is the weakest of faith. But listen carefully. Even the weakest of faith still has faith. It still counts. It still tips the scale. So the first role every believer plays is internal. To abhor oppression, to abhor injustice, to abhor what is occurring to our brothers and sisters throughout the world. Not because we are emotional only or angry, but because we're related to a higher sense of justice. Because when you see wrong, and it doesn't stir your heart, that's when you're in real danger. But when you see it and you hurt and you cry and you make dua, then know that your heart is alive, that even if your hands are bound and your voice is muffled, you are still resisting in a way that is most dear to Allah. And then there is dua. Oh, the power of dua. How many times we hear people say, "What will dua do?" They say it as if it's empty, as if it's nothing more than wishful thinking. But they don't understand what dua really is. Dua is not just asking. Dua is connecting. It is the soul reaching out to the one who controls all things. It is surrender and strategy at the same time. When a believer raises their hands in the darkness of the night, tears falling, voice trembling, whispering the names of cities and children and victims, that is a moment that shakes the heavens. That is a form of jihad that requires no resources, no platform, no audience, only sincerity. The Prophet sucks when faced with overwhelming challenges, when his companions were bleeding, when the believers were surrounded, when all hope seemed lost, would return to dua. He would raise his arms until his cloak fell from his shoulders, pleading to Allah until his voice cracked. He taught us that dua is not just a backup plan, it is the plan. It is the front line when every other door has been shut. And sometimes, even when the doors seem open, dua is what guides us to the right one. Dua is also a declaration of identity. When you say, Ya Allah, you are affirming who you are, a servant, a believer, someone who knows that their power is not in their wealth or their strength, but in their trust in the one above. And more than that, it teaches your children, your friends, your community what it means to be a Muslim, to return to Allah, not only in ease, but especially in difficulty. That when the world mocks us, when enemies surround us, when the news is filled with pain, our response is not hopelessness, but Husb Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. And let no one ever think that dua is without effect. The Prophet said that dua can change what has been decreed, that it can alter the course of destiny, not because we control fate, but because Allah has made dua a part of His divine wisdom. It is a rope that connects the seen with the unseen, a whisper that echoes in the heavens. Then comes charity, giving, supporting, sacrificing wealth for the sake of Allah. In times like these, when people are suffering, charity becomes a lifeline, not only for the one who receives, but for the one who gives, because charity purifies the soul. It removes greed. It anchors you in the reality of others, and it becomes a shield on the day of judgment. In the time of the Prophet, charity was never measured by quantity. It was always measured by sincerity. A man once gave a handful of dates, and the Prophet praised him more than others who gave in large sums because that was all he had. When you give with love, with pain, with longing, it is not forgotten. It is recorded. And it may be the very thing that tips the scale in your favor when the world is burning and the hour is near. And now, in our modern time, we have a new tool, one that can be dangerous, yes, but also powerful. Social media, the digital battlefield, the PR campaign. In the past, it was swords and arrows. Today, it is information and images, narratives, perceptions, and we are seeing it unfold before our eyes. For years, the narrative around Palestine was dominated by lies. Zionist voices shaped the global view. But now, the tide is shifting. Why? Because Muslims and even non-Muslims are standing up and showing the truth. They are sharing footage. They are telling stories. They are exposing injustice. This is not a sideshow. This is a war of ideas. And in many ways, it is just as important as physical resistance. Because perception shapes policy, awareness leads to action, and when millions of people around the world begin to question the lies they've been fed, the walls begin to crack. But we must be wise. The Prophet said, "Speak to people according to their level of understanding." So don't just share for shock, value. Don't just repost for the sake of going viral. Share with wisdom. Speak with compassion. Educate. Don't only provoke, because if you bring someone to the truth, even a step closer, Allah may reward you more than 1,000 posts that only made people angry. And finally, we must ask ourselves a difficult question. Why hasn't Allah given us what we ask for yet? Why is the suffering continuing? Why haven't we seen the liberation? The answer, only Allah knows in full. But maybe, just maybe, it's because we're not ready. Maybe if victory came now, we would corrupt it. Maybe we need more purification. Maybe the Ummah still needs to rise in faith before it can rise in power. It's not easy to accept, but it's necessary to reflect on. Allah is never late. His plan is perfect. And when He delays, it is not neglect. It is precision. There were times in our history when the Ummah nearly vanished. When the Mongols destroyed cities. When the Crusaders came marching into Masjid al-Aqsa, but out of the ashes Allah returned power. Because victory comes from humility and greatness comes from adversity. So we wait. We prepare within our hearts, within our homes, within our neighborhoods. We don't sit and scroll and wish. We act as much as we can. And all action matters. Perhaps you are a mother who is raising children with love and Islam. Perhaps you are a student studying with the goal of serving the Ummah. Perhaps you are an artist, a writer, a teacher, a cleaner, a neighbor. None of it matters. What is important is sincerity. What is important is doing what you can, where you are with what Allah provided. And as we do so, we continue to look to Him with each tear, each coin, each post, each prayer. Because when you add up all these little things, they are like drops in an ocean, and that ocean one day will swell, and when it does, falsehood will perish and truth will arise not as a rumor, but as a fact. It starts as a flicker, too small to see, a moment of silence in a school corridor. A little boy, perhaps 12 years old, puts up his hand and asks, "Why are they bombing Gaza?" His teacher hesitates, not knowing how to answer, but the boy's eyes are intent, with something that we do not usually find in the young purpose. This flash occurs, again somewhere else, a hijabi girl, a child. standing before her classroom reciting a poem she wrote on Palestine. Her voice shakes, but she does not give up. Another flash, a teenager wearing a hoodie watching videos of bombings on his phone, tears brimming in his eyes, and then he sets his phone aside, goes to the masjid and prays for weeks. These are not isolated instances. These are signs, markers of something stirring. And believe me, it is stirring. There is something brewing beneath the surface, something the world's news cameras will not reveal to you. In the midst of rubble and propaganda, in the midst of despair and confusion, there is a new generation that is stirring, one that is not content with silence, one that will not inherit their ancestors' fear. It is one that is arising with passion in their hearts and Quran in their hands. 30 years ago, go to a masjid in the West and you would see primarily elders. The young ones that were there were either being pulled in by their parents or around in a world of words that they could not understand. The khutbahs were not in their language. The messages did not make sense. Islam to most was something inherited rather than lived. It was a label, a code, a cultural identity that lay quietly in the fringes of their existence. But now, things are reversing themselves. Go to the masjid today, any masjid in the Western nations or in Africa, in Asia, in even repressed lands, and you'll witness the youth returning. At times they come shyly, sometimes they appear with questions, but they appear. There are high school students memorizing hadith during their spare time, teenagers establishing halakas within their schools, university students writing articles, producing videos, constructing platforms, all for the purpose of defending the truth, to awaken the faith, to bring people closer to Allah in a language they know. What ignited this blaze? It would be easy to describe the oppression in Palestine, the injustices worldwide, the agony of seeing their brothers and sisters perish as the world turns away. And yes, that is part of it. But suffering alone cannot raise a generation. What is happening today is greater than a response to suffering. It is a discovery, a religious awakening, a return as a group. In the midst of this international tide, of Islamophobia, of disinformation, of erasure and silencing of our identity, something remarkable has occurred. Rather than retreating, the young people are rising up. Rather than being silenced, they are speaking out. The repression intended to shatter them is doing the opposite. It is shaping them. This generation is maturing with access to information, such as never before. They are studying Quran translations on apps during breaks. They are hearing lectures from scholars around the globe in one afternoon. They are watching documentaries, studying the names of cities and heroes and martyrs they never learned in school. And in that process, they are finding out who they are, not merely as Muslims by name, but as Muslims by mission. Even their vocabulary is evolving. They are using the language of Tawhid, Ummah, Sabar, and Shahada. They are referencing Quran in TikTok quotes. They are signing emails with du'as. They are introducing Islam into every environment they occupy. Not flawlessly, not always intelligently, but honestly. And we need to understand the importance of this shift because this is not merely emotion. It's not merely teen energy or fleeting activism. This is the foundation of a renaissance. A generation or so ago, our communities were afraid that we would lose the youth. We feared that Islam would disappear in the West, watered down and lost. But Allah's word is never lying. He promised that He would keep His deen. And He is doing so through the very youth we feared were too lost to come back. And the more amazing is the children's courage under occupation. Have you ever heard a 9-year-old articulate from Gaza? Have you listened to the words issuing forth? From the lips of a child who's witnessed in 1 week what most of us will witness in a lifetime. They don't talk like victims. They talk like warriors. With eyes full of no, they talk about patience, about Allah's mercy, about martyrdom, about holding on for their land, their family, their deen. A kid from Gaza doesn't dream about fame, fortune. He dreams about freedom. He dreams about praying. In Masjid al-Aqsa, He dreams about seeing the smile on his parents' faces again, and he knows that he might die first. And still, he does not lose hope. He utters, "I am not afraid of death. I fear Allah only." A girl weeps at her mother's corpse, yet between her sobs, she mutters, "Alhamdulillah, my mother is a shahida." Their screams shake the heavens. These kids are not only courageous, they are a miracle, a living testament that when Allah wishes to save a people's honor, He does so through the hearts of the youngest of them, that when the world forgets you, Allah lifts you up. And their courage, their conviction, their steadfast faith is inspiring young people all over the globe. A Muslim youth in London or Chicago or Kuala Lumpur sees those videos and says, "What excuse do I have? If a kid under bomb continues to say Alhamdulillah, what am I doing with my safety, my privilege, my opportunity?" This is not guilt. It's awakening. And from this awakening, something beautiful is happening. A culture of purpose. More youth are pursuing Islamic knowledge, not merely cultural Islam, but genuine, authentic understanding. They are inquiring about fiqh, aka about history. They are contesting false narratives. They are taking back their faith, not something to conceal, but something to guide. And they're not seeking approval. They're constructing platforms, making art, publishing books, establishing organizations, marching, giving, praying, and most importantly, learning. Learning so they can do better than the previous generation. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're hopeful. Because they've seen the world the way it is, flawed, unfair, uncaring. And they think they can change it. Not single-handedly, not without Allah, but with Him, through Him. And that's where the power begins. Because a generation that turns back to Allah cannot be defeated. They will fall. Certainly they will err, but they will always come back. They will always get back up. They will always bear the torch. And perhaps this is what all the suffering was laying the groundwork for. Not merely the victory over our foes, but the resurrection of our identity. A generation that will not apologize for its belief. A generation that will not compromise truth for ease. A generation that will step into the tempest with La ilaha on their lips, knowing that victory is not always in outcomes but in obedience. And if the Mahdi were to rise tomorrow, this is the generation he would find. Not perfect, but prepared. Not sinless, but sincere. Not powerful, but principled, because they've been tested. And they're still here. They watched the world burn and chose not to turn away. They heard the cries from Gaza and didn't mute them. They witnessed the hypocrisy and still had hope. They did not choose Islam because it was simple, but because it was just. And that decision, that fire, that spark, it's not little anymore. It is turning into a flame. There is a time in every Muslim's life when they question, when will Allah's promise arrive? A time when the burden of oppression weighs so heavily, when the pain of watching others suffer grows too intense, when every door seems closed and every prayer feels like it echoes back in silence. It's in that moment when the soul trembles and the heart aches that the words of Allah come not as a statement, but as a lifeline. Do not think that Allah is unaware of what the oppressors do. He merely postpones them to a day when eyes will gaze with horror. These are not mere words on paper. They are the rumble under the silence, the promise under the pause. And that pause currently sounds lengthy. The wails in Gaza, in Syria, in East Turkestan, in Sudan, in Kashmir, they reverberate every day. Pictures of dead children, ruined buildings, sobbing parents. They are not history. They are headlines. And still, the question lingers. Why does it persist? Why has aid not arrived? But then, better still, is this question. What are we doing with the time that has been granted us? Allah's promise is never in question. The question is not if He will keep it. The question is if we are deserving of being included in it. Because victory is not an instant. It is a gift, a trust. And Allah does not bestow that trust on everybody. He bestows it on those who are prepared. Those who do not just lift their fists, but uplift their hands in dua, their voices in honesty, and their hearts in submission. Look at our state. We pray for unity, but how united are we? We plead for strength, but how strong is our commitment? To the Quran? We pray for the Mahdi to ascend, for Isa to come down, for Dal to descend. But do we pray Fajr on schedule? Do we keep our tongues locked in silence from slander? Do we cover our eyes, our ears, our limbs? Or do we weep for Palestine with our lips and nourish our souls on the same systems that make its oppressors strong? Not condemnation. Reflection. Allah's mercy is vast. But do we ask ourselves if we are aiding or abetting the arrival of the very change we pray about? The Prophet used to narrate to his friends about a moment which would arrive, a moment where it would be as if one is holding hot coal in their hand. We live in that moment. A moment of perversion where truth becomes hate and lies become progress, where patience is ridiculed, modesty becomes a laughing stock, and whoever calls for godly justice is termed as extremist. But still, the smoldering coal has to be clutched because release is impossible. And in this period, even death assumes a new connotation. The children who perish under bombs, the parents buried with their offspring, the elderly who expire amidst the debris, they are not lost to Allah. He does not regard their deaths as loss. Indeed, He says they live, sustained, rejoicing. Do not say that the people who are murdered on the path of Allah are dead. Instead, they are alive, being provided by their Lord, rejoicing at what Allah has given them. They are waiting at the gates of paradise, waiting to welcome those coming after them, waiting to assure us it was worth it. The hunger, the pain, the bombs. It did not go in vain because what lay ahead of them was unimaginable. This is what instills hope in the believer. Not blind hope, but faith rooted in reason, knowing that Allah never wastes a tear, that each cry, each blood drop, each sleepless night is etched. And when that day arrives, justice won't be delayed. For a moment. But until then, we have work to do. And the initial part of that work is in ourselves. Trust in Allah is not sitting back. It is not saying inshallah and doing nothing. Actual trust, tawakkul, is exertion coupled with assurance. It is striving while being aware that the outcome is from Him. It is making dua while making the moves. It is giving to the oppressed while learning ourselves and others. It is boycotting injustice while constructing institutions of justice. It is raising voices while praying through the night. It is weeping in sujud while standing strong in the streets. Faith in Allah means believing that He will never let down His servants, but also believing that He will put them to test first, just as He put the prophets to test, just as He put the companions to test, just as He is putting us to test right now. And maybe the biggest test of our era is not violence, but distraction. The insidious pulling of our hearts away from the cause. The whispers that tell you that you can't change things. The temptation of ease that tells you someone else will. The evil normalization that convinces us to scroll past pain without blanching. But the believer stands firm. The believer utters, "Even if I am not going to be able to change the world, I can at least change myself, and that change may ripple out in ways beyond my imagination." And when we all make that our covenant, real change starts. Think of what would occur if each Muslim who wept over Gaza also had a plan to better their own deen, to pray more earnestly, to study more, to bring up their children on Tawhid, to create more robust communities. Think of what would occur if we coupled our pain with purpose, our outrage with organization, our anger with action. We would not be far from victory because victory doesn't only arrive with armies. Sometimes it starts with intentions. Sometimes it gets constructed in the unseen through the persistence of quiet believers who keep working, keep repenting, keep giving, keep arriving day after day, even when nobody is looking. Those are the soldiers Allah loves, the ones who are genuine in the shadows, who don't merely wait for the Mai to come but live as if he already did. And then when that generation matures, Allah will assign the one to guide them, because that is the way of Allah. Remember, when people of Bani Israel had repented sincerely, Allah gave them Musa. When Qur had reached their pinnacle of tyranny, Allah sent Muhammad. When the world is again filled with oppression, and people weep not only with mouths but with hearts turned to Allah, He will send forth the Mai. He will send forth Isa. He will overthrow the rule of Jal. But it begins with us. Not in great gestures, but in small revolutions. In the way we talk, the way we bring up our children, what we teach, what we tolerate, what we cherish, what we boycott, what we construct, what we are. And the ones we've lost, our martyrs, will be waiting for us. Kids, parents, siblings lost. Too early in this world, but not in the next. They are not memories. They are the driving force. They are the witnesses. And maybe if Allah wills, they will be the ones to meet us at the gates and say, "You made it. You didn't forget us. You stayed true." So let the heart ache. Let the tears fall. But let the feet move. Let the hands give. Let the mouth speak. Let the knees bend in sujud. Let the soul get ready, because the promise of Allah is at hand. And it is lovely beyond comprehension. And thus we end not with finality but with purpose, because this journey is not concluding. It is merely commencing. What you have heard, what you have sensed, what has awakened within you. Let it not dissipate with the final word. Let it turn into action, into prayer, into insight, into reason. The indicators are numerous. The world is changing. Oppression can be louder, but so can truth. And before the darkness, we are not supposed to be passive witnesses. We are supposed to be witnesses of belief, bearers of light, inheritors of a tradition that runs from the du'as of Ibrahim all the way to the last gasp of Muhammad. We may not know the precise time when the Mai will emerge. We might not see Isaisam fall or see Jal decline. But what we can see is our own awakening. We can be of the generation that tilled the soil, that sowed the seeds, that watered the soil of faith with tears, wisdom, and toil. Do not make light of your part in this story. Unfolding. You are not too small. You are not too late. The Ummah is born with honest people who have the courage to believe that change starts with them. And Allah's promise is not to the strongest or to the loudest. It is to the most truthful, to the most patient, to those who move with conviction, even when the world instructs them otherwise. So stand up with your heart, with your voice, with your life, and let Allah include you among those who did not wait for victory, but made themselves the cause it came. Ameen.